My name's Chal Ravens. I work at Novara Media, and I am very pleased to be joined now by, I think, one of our greatest, most innovative filmmakers working in this country today. You probably know him from his amazing trilogy of documentaries about Amy Winehouse, Ayrton Senna, and Diego Maradona. One of his recent projects is a sort of close-up portrait of the final days of Roger Federer's tennis career. And his forthcoming film, a feature film called 2073, is a dystopian thriller. So, people of Bristol, please give a warm hand to Asif Kapadia.
Thank you. What an amazing event. I'm so happy to be here with all the people talking here and on this side, but also with Massive Attack and everyone who's over there. So thanks for having me. Thanks for coming in.
Yes, we're so happy to have you. So a bit of a clarification first. This talk is called 2073, Directing Dystopia. This film is not out yet, and it hasn't even had its premiere yet.
No.
So technically, I've been told that there's only so much that we're even allowed to know about it.
And no one's seen it yet, therefore, including you.
But I feel that in this tent, we've got quite a, the Novara zone at the Climate Action Accelerator. These are trustworthy people.
It's the perfect place.
You can tell them about the film. So what can we know?
It's oh God. Right. So the film I started about 4 years ago because it was during lockdown. I'm looking at what is going on in the world and I'm thinking, am I going mad? It's like, what the fuck is going on is basically the subtitle for the film. So I don't know anything else other than making movies. So I thought I'd just start talking to people. I just start interviewing them and I just start talking to them to figure out what are the issues. And I spoke to about 70 or 80 journalists around the world and activists, artists, musicians, all sorts of people saying, what do you think is happening right now in the world? And out of this sort of research, which could have led to nothing, I thought if there's something there, I'll try and turn it into a film. And everyone kept coming back to the same feeling that there's something happening. We're not quite sure, but it's not good. And I was like, so what's different? And really the common denominator kept coming back to tech and technology. There's something about the way tech is now a part of our lives that the whole world and all of these sort of authoritarians and all of this feeling of like we're in this kind of dystopian present, it's all happening at the same time everywhere because it's almost like, as one journalist said to me from India, it's almost like all the kind of bad actors around the world are on a WhatsApp group saying, guess what I just did? And it worked. And they're like, I can do that too. And everyone's doing the same thing. Whether it's in India, Brazil, this started in 2020, but my feeling that wanting to make a film started with Brexit and what happened, and what I was seeing on television and what journalists were saying and what politicians were saying and the lies, all of this just came to a head. Like I kept thinking, am I going mad? And really that's what the film is. The film's about this, and it came down to three main things, kind of the breakdown of democracy or the kind of attack on democracy, the rise of authoritarianism, the use of tech, and the destruction of the climate, all being the same thing globally. So
is it a documentary? What is it?
So, and my background is in drama. My first few films were fiction films. I trained writing and directing drama. But then the films that I kind of got more well known for, Senna, Amy, Maradona, were docs. And so they were kind of made in the style of fiction films. This is a mixture of the two. I quite like to experiment and do different things. And so this is fiction and archive, and it's also using actors. Samantha Morton, who was performing earlier, she's in it. And so I wanted to kind of play with the form because essentially I like to work with genre. So Senna was like me doing an action movie. Amy was a musical. And Maradona was a gangster film where he happened to be really good at football, but it's a Camorra film in Naples. And this is a dystopian sci-fi set in the future. If we do nothing, where do we end up? That's the idea.
I'm also aware that apparently 2073 is somehow based on the new wave film La Jetée, which is like a time travel dystopian, amazing film that's only made almost entirely with still images, so it has a sense of archive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Chris Marker's is kind of amazing French New Wave filmmaker, artist, essayist. And so it's a kind of different kind of genre. He did this other film, Sunless, Sans Soleil. So I suppose it was inspired by this idea that if he could do time travel using stills, and it's the film that every sci-fi film you've ever seen, Back to the Future to any Chris Nolan film, anything, all of them play with the kind of ideas that I would say Chris Marker created with Le Jeté.
So, but that makes me think, and it's also 12 Monkeys, it's basically that plot as well. And it makes me think, though, that similarly with your documentaries, you're working with a story that already exists somehow. Like it's either a true story that you're trying to piece together from an archive, or it's a kind of story that's already in like the idea space, as Alan Moore might say. So what kind of challenges does that pose when you know that your audience already know where you're going with it?
It's a good point. Yeah, in a way, you know the ending. You know what happened to Amy Winehouse. The idea is to tell the journey and for you to understand how did we get there, and to kind of take you kind of on an emotional journey, and hopefully to switch what you might have initially thought about Amy before you saw the film, or what you thought about Senna or Maradona. It's like taking a perception, and the story is the route to get there, the journey. And in this case, you know, there may be a lot of information in the film that people know, but my intention is always to connect the dots and to take things and to kind of shorten it. So I've spent years making films to try and squeeze it all together in a form that you can take in one hit. It's not a 10-part series. It's one film. It's 5 minutes long. I want it to be quite powerful and tough, and I want it to be a bit of a punch in the stomach, really, and to get audiences also to do what we're doing now, to be a collective again, because a lot of it to do with tech is to separate us, to have us on our phones or at home alone, not seeing things and experiencing things collectively, and then discussing it or disagreeing, whatever it might be. It's all about getting you to separate and argue with someone you've never met, probably. And so I wanted to kind of make a movie where we come and we look at the biggest issues facing us and say, well, how are we collectively going to deal with this and answer and find solutions? And it's a collective problem. A lot of docs have this pressure put on them. Like if you make a documentary, you've got to give all the answers at the end. Like give people hope. I didn't feel particularly hopeful when I was making it. I was feeling really shit, actually. So I want people to, it's not about me giving you all the answers. I think we're going to have to figure it all out because we have to do something quick. You know, that's the intention of the movie.
Anyone who's seen your documentaries will know that one of the sort of unique, striking things about them is the way that you use archive footage and don't use talking heads or sort of overdubbed narration typically. And I know that you don't tend to work with a script, right? So that kind of reminds me, thinking of, you know, working as a journalist, of news gathering or investigative journalism, where you don't really know what it is that you're looking for until you continue. So do you ever end up stumbling across information about your subject that kind of changes what you think about them and makes you have to reroute the idea?
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly the intention, is to do kind of all three kind of processes of making films at the same time. So I start off by doing interviews and talking to people, and then we're doing research and looking for archive and looking for material, and at the same time we're editing. And the edit will then inform the interviews. The interviews will then inform what material we need to look for. And then when we look for footage and archive, suddenly the story shifts. Because the aim of film, for me, is you've got to tell the story visually. You've got to show and not tell. So I don't do talking heads. I don't have kind of people speaking on camera. The idea is always to say, what is the point? What is the story? What is the story beat? What are we trying to tell an audience? What are we trying to make them feel? And then how do we show it? And to find footage in order to visually show this so that it becomes cinematic. And the audience react in a different way when you're watching something rather than being told something.
I would love to know how you keep track of all of the ideas when you're working on it. I'm thinking it's a cork board, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it is journalism. It is like being a detective. It is like that, you know, scene in a kind of detective movie where they're in a hotel room and they've got lots of lines on the wall connecting. It's exactly what we did on Amy. People may have known Amy's story, or they thought they did, but that process of speaking to every single person, in that case, people did not trust the media. They didn't trust journalists. They didn't trust anyone. Amy's friends, I'm talking about, because they'd never spoken before, and they thought the industry and entertainment business had killed her. So I had to earn their trust by talking to them. And in that case, I interviewed people with no camera. I don't generally bring a camera along. It might just be me in the room. There may be a microphone on a table and a mixer, sound recordist in another room. With Amy, we sat in the dark. I turned the lights off. We sat in the dark talking because everyone was so uncomfortable and so didn't trust anyone, that they were worried there was always going to be some tabloid journalist listening or watching. So we met in a very safe space, and basically I interviewed them in pitch black. And every film, there's a different kind of solution to kind of figure out how to do this. A lot of 2073 started on Zoom calls because we couldn't physically meet. So Carol Cadwell from The Guardian, I interviewed, and the very first interview I did with her is kind of featured. She's featured in a film. There's journalists in India, there's journalists in the Philippines, journalists in the US, many of whom were under attack. I mean, that was one of the other things on that film. I thought, who are the heroes right now? Who are the people that I want to kind of elevate on this new film? And really, it's journalists holding power to account. They're the people that I wanted to kind of highlight. They're the people taking on these dictators and authoritarians and being killed in certain parts of the world or being imprisoned. Lawfare is being used against them. That's what I thought. They're the people I want you to know about. If you don't know about them already, these are the people you should know about because they're the ones fighting for you. They're the ones that are trying to get the truth out there and being attacked big time for it.
I feel like watching Amy, Senna, Maradona, you get this sense, even with Amy, who is a relatively recent icon, that the type of celebrities that they were don't really exist anymore. Like it's a sort of different era of celebrity somehow, or celebrity culture is very different, I suppose. How do you think the nature of celebrity has changed in the time since you've been making films? I guess I'm wondering if you could make the same types of film again, or if there's something different now.
I mean, it's obviously something to do with my age, and therefore the kind of people and the period that I've made films about. It's kind of going back to me, when I was maybe in my 20s or something, or a bit older with Amy. I think what has changed, not so much is kind of celebrity, but the medium in which we record. So Senna, Amy, Maradona, all of them were kind of recorded on physical tape in one form or another. And what happened was the information was recorded and put on a shelf or put in storage somewhere. What's changed is the phone. What's changed is tech. What's changed is rather than somebody looking through an eyepiece and holding a camera, and when they're interviewing someone, you're talking directly to the person. It's become a lot more of this, isn't it? It's like filming yourself and then worrying about where your chin is. And if you don't like it, delete, or manipulating the image. And so what I've found is now the way information is being recorded and filmed has changed because of who's holding the camera. And something changed. I think Senna played a big part in it. That was the film where no one really cared too much pre-Senna about archive, right? And then suddenly that film came along and everyone's like, oh, there's money in archive, right? And that's worth a lot. And so the industry's changed in terms of people don't do music videos anymore. Like Massive Attack and some of the best music videos ever made by Jonathan Glazer and people like that. Okay, so what you've got now is the money you'd spend making a music video, people just make an entire movie about an artist. Yeah. And that is then controlled by the artist. Right. It is controlled by their management. It is very much promotion. It's an advert for them, but it's a feature film. And I think that's what's happened more. The medium has kind of changed in terms of who's in control of it all.
Yeah. Celebrities are they're both more guarded, but they're also in many ways sort of giving more of themselves, but it's this tightly curated version, it's like the Beyonce documentary or something, but then she never gives an interview. How did that play out when you made your recent film about Roger Federer, who's also very alive, very present? Did you feel like the access was tightly controlled?
So I didn't meet him, actually. Someone shot this footage. It was never meant to come out, and people contacted me. So I treated that as archive. I didn't actually speak to him. I wasn't there when it was shot. And then I looked at it, and it was a slightly different film. It's a very small framing. It's only about 12 days in time, and it's about getting old. It's about your body not being able to do it anymore, and it's about the end of his career, really. So that was a slightly different film, yeah.
But do you then foresee that you won't be able to make the same type of sort of profile documentary as you've done before? Is that?
I don't know. I mean, that's why I wanted to change what I was doing myself with the new film, because it was like, well, what are we making? Why do I make films? What's the point? What are we trying to say? And it felt like there were bigger issues at play. And that's why the kind of 2073 film was about what's going on in the world and what small things can I do to try to make a difference, to kind of highlight certain issues, or to realize that this issue on the other side of the world is your problem. It's coming. You may not think it's your issue right now, but it's going to happen to you eventually, because the information or the surveillance or the tech that is being used against a group of people on the other side of the world, you're presently giving away. All it needs is a little shift in how power works, and then they can do the same thing to you. So that became more important to me at this stage of my life, at the age that I'm at. Also because I've been making films long enough to kind of say, well, this is a gamble to do something like this, because the people that I'm talking about are the people, very, very, very rich, powerful people who control most of the media or control kind of systems of getting films out there. You know, so it's a kind of tricky subject matter, but I just like, well, I've got kids, I've got teenage kids. It's like, what are we leaving behind if we don't start talking about stuff now? And what's been amazing about this event is everyone's been talking about what's going on in the world right now, which is why I'm really happy to be here.
Working at Novara, we obviously have to, you know, we're in the business of reporting on and analysing what is actually happening in the world, so assuming that there is some kind of objective reality out there that we can talk about. This isn't a philosophy question. What has making documentaries taught you about the nature of reality and how we actually understand, you know, our ways of communicating our stories to each other?
It's a bloody big question, isn't it? I mean, look, it's changed. Films are, I'm quite a slow filmmaker, so it can take me 5 years to make one film, or 4 years, and you know, that's the upside of people who make something and quickly put it out on social media. They shot something in the morning, it can be out later on in the day. My way of looking at it is I try to make films over a longer period of time, and not to be like current as to what happened yesterday, but just to get more of a kind of feeling of trends and how things are changing. When I started this film, AI wasn't a thing. Right, and then it became a thing, and then it became the most dangerous thing. And this year is the year with like the most elections happening around the world ever. And this year, 72% of the population of the world's population is living under authoritarian rule. 72%. So this kind of period of kind of elections and what's going on, AI, post-truth. You know, people can lie and it's fine and they get away with it. So we're just witnessing massive shift in information, news, how we get our information. What I see and what you see and what my kids see are all totally different. We don't have like a shared reality. So if you don't have a shared reality, what's true then? Whose truth is it? You know, who controls what truth is out there? Well, we know who controls the biggest kind of social media platforms. Why would they want to buy that? What is the purpose? So there's a lot going on. So that, I would say, is a long-winded answer for it's scary, I think, because there isn't a kind of regular, we're not all sitting down and watching the same thing every evening to say that is a given, or reading the same newspapers. And so that was a part of my kind of process, I suppose, of what I've learned. And that's the kind of tricky part of where we're heading. Because the thing is, wherever we are now, people might think everything's great, everything's fine, no problem, right? But the way things are going, the trends are not positive. And I didn't know that for a fact. I was just talking to people to say, this is how I feel. What do you think? And everyone, once I earned their trust and they opened up, said, yeah, something's happening and it's serious. And it's not just here in the UK, or it's not just the US. Because, you know, I had a Zoom call with people I'm working with in the US, and they're all like, everything's great, Kamala's going to win, everything's fine. And I remember when I started on a film, people were worried about Trump, and then he didn't win an election, everything's great. And then it's like, well, that lasted how long before it all became shit again? Or it was always shit. And then everyone's like, they were worried, really worried, and now they think they're fine, so therefore the whole world is fine. I don't think it is. And then that could just switch, because the people who... Carol Cadwalladr, who I mentioned earlier, wrote an article a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if you saw in The Guardian, about what happened here, and the riots that happened a few weeks ago came up, you know, just a couple of conversations ago. And they were like, just like Brexit was a petri dish for Trump, she was like, that whole summer of shit, those riots all over the country, that's like a mini petri dish of what's happening in the US when the elections come along. You know, don't think just because it's just England's problem or the UK issue. that is a little test of, look, if I say this on social media, look what I can set off. The person who owns that will probably be doing the same thing later on in America. And I think that's what I found when I talk to people, is that we just have to realize everything's connected. We're all connected, and these issues are global. And so that isn't going away. And AI and the confusion of, can you believe anything you see online? I don't know if anyone knows what they're looking at really half the time, or reading.
I've just got a couple. Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your upbringing, actually, because I know that you grew up in Hackney in the 70s and 80s, which is, a different time and place in many ways. And I wondered if there is anything particular about your upbringing that you've brought into your filmmaking, and also if you had any political awakening as a teenager.
I'm a Hackney boy, old Hackney, very poor working class, very multicultural. Went to state school, free school dinners. My parents, my dad was a postman, my mum was a machinist. I don't come from any kind of connection to the film business. Got a grant to go to college. It's the only reason I was able to go to uni and make films, work my way up. So I come very much, I'm not Oxbridge. I don't come from kind of there were no favors to get me. I made a tea and worked my way up and made short films. But what I always knew was that I always wanted to be my own boss. And I would work for people, get experience, and then leave. And then most of the time people would say, why don't you stay on? You can make some money. I was like, no, I don't really want to work for anyone. I've never really had a contract. For a short moment of time, I worked in TV in 94, hated it, quit my job. I couldn't do it. I couldn't have a boss. I just thought, I can't do that 9-to-5 thing. It doesn't work for me. So I kind of decided to make films the way I wanted to make films. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My sister's very political, hardcore kind of feminist, and very outspoken, very well read, very well educated. So read this. So yeah, a lot of it came from my sisters, to be honest. And if you grew up in Hackney in the 70s and 80s, it's time of Margaret Thatcher. Fucking hell, so you basically can't be, you have to be political because you're fighting that. It definitely has informed me, definitely is a part of the kind of films that I make. I'm always trying to make films. Filmmaking is hard. It costs money. It's very political. It's like there are systems in place. You can't just do it on your own. You really do need a lot of people behind you, and you need money, and that's just making it, and then you got to get it out there. So you have to understand and navigate the process of it. So it's political, it's money, it's financial, with a teeny bit of art somewhere in there as well. And so that's been really the reason I could make the film that I've just done, is because I don't have to worry about getting sacked for my own company. Because while making it, a lot of people privately, over all the shit that's going on in the world right now, the number of people that privately have contacted me saying, I wish I could say what you're saying online, but I can't because I'd lose my job. I'm afraid of saying this, I'm afraid of that, but I'm really glad you're saying it. And I'm talking about a lot of people are too scared to say what they think, because contractually, if they work for a certain company, they're not allowed to be political. It's okay if you say something pro-Tory, but if you said anything against them, you lose your job. I mean, that's in their contracts. That's the way the system works, whether you're in Ofcom, whether you work at film finance companies, whether you work in the arts, whether you work in a museum, a media organization, journalists. It's nuts what's going on right now. And this is the kind of creep of authoritarian rule. This is like people are scared to say what they think because they're going to lose their jobs. And they know it's a fact because that person did over there. So I suppose if you're brown and if your background is Muslim and you grow up working class, you know this anyway, right? It's always been like this, right? Nothing changed. It's always been like this. It's always going to be a fight. It's always going to be a struggle. It's always going to be a challenge to kind of break through. And so that's, for me, been the norm. I'm just older now, and I've been doing it a long time. And so I just decided I'm not afraid. I'm just going to say what I'm going to say. I'm just going to do what I'm going to do, and fuck it, whatever happens, happens. I'm too old to not do it anymore, I suppose.
What a great answer. Give it up for Asif Kapadia. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.